and welcome to the What's New in Sentinel session. So as already mentioned, it's an overview session that will cover all the new features released in Microsoft Sentinel over the past year. So whether they've entered public preview or gone into general availability. Now, my name is Naomi Christis, and I'm very thrilled to be presenting alongside my awesome colleague, Jeremy. So we're very delighted that you could join us today, and we hope everyone had a fantastic summer break. Now, first, let's quickly walk through today's agenda. For those who joined our last What's New webinar, you might notice that we've kept the structure the same. So we'll begin with some celebrations, followed by a brief discussion of our vision, and then we'll dive into the main event, which is, of course, an overview of all the features released over the last year. We'll wrap things up with 3 exciting demos that will showcase some of these new features. Now, before we dive into the vision and updates, let's take a very quick moment to celebrate some key milestones for Microsoft Sentinel. We've already covered our achievements up to 2022 in our previous webinar, so today we'll just focus on the highlights for the past year. So in 2023, we remained a leader in both Forrester Wave Security Analytics and Gartner SIEM MQ. We released the Unified Portal, which is a very significant milestone, and we also introduced Copilot, which integrates AI into our products. And this year, so 2024, we're excited to announce the general availability of that previously mentioned Unified Portal. And in June, we actually dedicated a special webinar to celebrate this milestone. So if you'd like to watch or re-watch that webinar, you can easily find it on our YouTube channel just by searching for the Unified Portal. Now, onto our vision. So our vision remains the same, which means that we want to empower every SOC team to protect their digital estate. We want to help protect against threats, improve your SOC efficiency, and increase our flexibility to customize to your needs. And just like in our last webinar, we have divided the new features into a set of comprehensive capabilities. So those categories that you now can see on screen will guide our discussion over the next few minutes. Now, Jeremy, would you like to take it away and lead us into the main event of this webinar?
Thank you, Naomi, for the great intro. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the What's New session. Now, as what Naomi mentioned, we'll categorize all the What's New item into 6 pillars. So for those who are familiar or have watched some of our previous What's New sessions, so the format will be the same. Now, because we have an extensive list to share with you guys, so we won't be able to go through each and every item in detail. Now, some of the item lists, as you can see here, are in italic. That means those are the items that we have discussed in the last What's New session. So probably the status have changed from public preview to GA, for example. So for those items, such as the first 2 in the tables over here, incident tasks. So we have discussed previously. So we would not talk about that this time. So next one we're going to talk about is the one of the new releases that we have announced a few months ago, and then it went GA after a month, which is the SIEM migration experience. So today we have a migration tool that will help customers migrate from Splunk to Sentinel. And we have talked to a few customers, right, who were migrating from Splunk to Sentinel about the challenges. So one of the top challenges that been raised is the detection rules. So customer might have a lot of detection rules in their environment, and it will take time for them to migrate to Sentinel. So we have built a tool to accelerate that process. So first of all, the tool will actually look at your existing detection rules in Splunk. So there will be a step for you to import your existing content from Splunk into Sentinel, and then we'll map that against our out-of-box content. So if we found any matching content, such as some of the first 4 items that you see in the screenshot over here, so we will highlight them, and then there might be some content that not out of the box, but we'll create a custom detection for you, right? And there could be some of the items which are partially translated, but you could edit it on the fly. And another benefit of the tool is you can actually deploy the detection rules on the fly within the tool. Now, besides that, another item that we have announced, so this is something that we announced last year actually, which is the simplified pricing. So in the past, there are 2 pricing on meter, right, for Sentinel customers. So you have the Sentinel ingestion charges, and you also have the log analytics ingestion. So both of them, if you would like to, so in the past, if you would need to, let's say, configure complement tier, right? So you would have to go to 2 separate locations, right, to configure them. So right now, with this simplified pricing experience, everything's unified under 1 meter, and you only need to configure them in 1 single location. And lastly, in this pillar, which is the MITRE page enhancement. So the MITRE blade in Sentinel is something that we have announced a while ago, but we keep enhancing it and adding new features. So for example, the MITRE version, right? We are updating it regularly. And we recently added new matrices into the MITRE dashboard. So for example, we have added the mobile matrices and also the ICS. And besides that, in the MITRE blades, we have also added visualization of how many incidents and alerts that trigger based on a specific MITRE tactics and techniques. Now, Naomi, do you want to take us through some of the items under disrupt attack and automate incident response?
Yes, sure. Thanks. So let's see what we have for automatic response. We'll start with the second row. So we've released some new solutions specifically designed for SOAR. So I actually just recommend you to head over to the Content Hub blade to check out the latest solutions, filter on SOAR, and you'll see them appear. Moving over to the next row, we see that we GA'd the ability to trigger your playbooks on an incident or entity. Next up is SAP Disrupt. Now, since we unified XDR with Sentinel, we can now also secure your SAP environments with disruption. So this will automatically stop ongoing attacks on your SAP environment. We've also announced new Microsoft Defender for Office 365 APIs, which extend some of the functionalities of the Graph APIs. So think, for example, of performing response actions on emails. For task repositories, I do recommend that you read the blog post, which was actually written to celebrate the launch into GA of the tasks feature. So task repositories are useful if you have a lot of incidents with a lot of different tasks. So instead of creating complex playbooks with different conditions based on which incident is being handled at the moment, we've made it easier by using watch lists that match the right task to each incident title. So go ahead and read the blog post. The next feature, very useful if you want to make a distinction between tags being part of a collection or if they should be seen as individual items for your conditions on your automations. And lastly, this one is not yet officially in public preview, but it's soon to be released. So we got the permission to already share it. This feature allows customers to export automation rules and then later on import them, for example, in another environment. Now back to you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Naomi. That's quite a long list, so I'll let you to catch your breath. So moving on to the next pillar, which is the optimized SOC platform. So this is so there are some innovations that released in the past few months. So the first two items are actually pretty recent. We announced it last month. So the first one is the auxiliary logs table plan. So this is a cheap ingestion table plan. And if you are familiar with in the past basic logs, right? So this is available at a price that's cheaper than basic logs. So under the hood is powered by ADIS v2. So today is in public preview. At the time that we speak now, we haven't started charging it. So feel free to give it a try if you have any use cases that, for example, you have logs which are high in volume and low in value, right? That you might use it for, let's say, investigation purposes only and not detection. Or maybe you might have logs which used for compliance purposes, right? That you might need to store for long term and might not want to access it frequently. So this will be one of the options for you to explore. And the next item, summary rules. So these provide you with the capabilities to set up a schedule, and you can run your defined query to summarize or to aggregate the logs, right? So I talked about the auxiliary logs earlier. So let's say you have logs which are high in volume and low in value, but you might have use cases. So let's say you might have a lot of firewall logs, but you want to summarize it, right? I want to summarize like, let's say for the logon, right? When was the last logon, right? And the earliest time that you've seen for this particular failure. So those kind of use cases, you can aggregate them and with summary rules, and the result will be ingested into the standard analytics tier table so that you can use it for correlation, for detection, and even for visualization, right? So as you imagine, this will work hand in hand with the auxiliary logs table plan. But besides auxiliary logs, you can also use this for basic or even the standard analytics tier. So definitely something that if you haven't try it, I strongly encourage you to check it out. Now, besides that, SOC optimization is also a feature that we announced sometime early this year and then already GA recently. We often hear from customers that, hey, how do I optimize my environment, right? So it could be improving the ROI, right? The value of the logs that you are bringing in. So for example, you might be ingesting certain data types, but you are not really utilizing it. So what I mean by that would be perhaps you might be ingesting a lot of data, but no one actually queried the table. Or maybe there's no detection rule created, right? So that doesn't justify the ROI. And SOC optimization will actually surface this information for you. And not only you get the visibility, but you also get out of the box recommended actions, right? So we provide actionable recommendations such as, hey, maybe there's a table that you are ingesting, you're not using it, but we have out of the box content, right, that you could deploy and get immediate benefits. Or maybe, you might have tables that you don't need to create detection rule, but only for compliance purposes. And we will recommend user to change the data plan, right, to a cheaper ingestion tier. Now, besides that, we also help you to improve your security coverage by providing threat-based scenarios. So today we provide the 6 out-of-the-box threat-based use cases where you could deploy the connectors and analytics through that immediately increase your security coverage. Now, besides that, we also have a deep dive webinar on SOX optimization 2 months ago. So feel free to check it out if you want to learn more. Now, with the release of the SOX optimization, we also have the API available. So for the user who would like to interact with SOX optimization programmatically, so for example, maybe MSSP, you might want to interact with your customer's environment, right? So you could leverage the API. So that's something that's definitely going to be handy. And apart from that, there's also a workbook, optimization workbook. So the workbook has been released last year, but it has been updated from time to time. And it also now include SOX optimization recommendation. Now, Naomi, do you want to share a couple of key features regarding TI?
Yeah, happy to. So for TI, we have 3 features that we haven't covered in a previous webinar. So first up are the enrichment widgets. So these components are dynamic and they provide some in-depth information about entities. So widgets will integrate both external and internal data from, well, various different sources, the one that you configure. Now in the screenshot, you can see where to configure these widgets, and you can also see that we will need to create a key vault, since credentials are required to access and maintain your connections to your preferred data sources. You can also see where you can configure your sources that you want to add to the enrichment widgets. Currently, we support connections with sources like VirusTotal, Anomaly, Abuse IPDB, and a couple more. Now, in the last screenshot in the left corner, we've included an example of the Abuse IPDB widget, just to show how it might appear in your incident and what additional information it can provide during your threat hunting. On to the next feature. Now, we've made it easier to view and manage your indicators directly from the threat intelligence plate. So from this year on, you can sort, filter, and search your imported or created threat indicators without needing to write a log analytics query in the logs place. So from now on, you can simply perform all these actions from the threat intelligence plate itself. Lastly, we just wanted to highlight the release of the Malware Protection Essentials solution. Moving on to open and extensible protection for all our assets. The first feature, not yet publicly released, but since we discussed it in a previous webinar, we can mention it here as well. So this is the combined solution for Microsoft business apps, and this will allow you to monitor and detect various suspicious activities in your Dynamics 365 and Power Platform environments. Now, for more details, I recommend visiting our YouTube channel again and searching for the webinar focused on those Microsoft business apps. The next 2 features are AMA connectors that allow you to collect logs from Windows Firewall and Cisco ASA. And the last one we wanted to mention is the general availability of the Web Sessions Essentials solution. But Jeremy, I think we have some more solutions lined up, right?
Definitely. There are more in this category. So first of all, because of the unified SOX platform, right, there are some improvement that we made on the bidirectional sync, right, of the Defender XDR connector. So now, you will be able to sync additional properties. Although I would encourage, if you are using Defender XDR, right, and haven't on board to the unified SOX platform, I would encourage you to do so. And next, we have a couple of new connectors. So we have a connectors for Workday, and this is something new, and this is built based on the Colors Connector platform. The next one is one of the important announcements that we made a few months ago, which is the our partnership with Cribble. So for those who are not aware, so Cribble is a data collection tool. So it's allows you to collect data at scale and source agnostic, and allows you to perform filtering and transformation as well. So later on there'll be a demo showcased by Naomi that will give you a bit of overview on how it looks like. And just want to highlight that I mentioned about auxiliary logs earlier, so you can also use Cribble to ingest data into auxiliary logs. And moving on, a couple of more new connectors, such as the CrowdStrike Falcon. So this is the second version of the connector where you're able to get events, right, and from the Falcon agents and ingest into normalized table. There's also a Cisco Meraki logs using REST API, and also Google Street Command Center. So just want to highlight that our approach will be the API first, right? So whenever possible, we will want to build connectors that bring data from API. So that's why you see that there are some connectors that are actually leveraging API to ingest the data. But I think there's more. So I talk about something at scale. Maybe Naomi, I think you have more to share with us.
Yes, thank you. So first, let's talk about workspace replication. So as the name suggests, this feature allows you to create a replica of your workspace in another region. Now, this has been a highly requested feature by some customers, particularly the ones that need a solid disaster recovery process. So if an incident impacts your primary workspace, you can trigger a failover to switch to your secondary workspace. And by switching to your backup workspace, you can then just continue monitoring your resources and apps without interruption. And small spoiler alert, Jeremy will also use this feature in his demo. Another exciting development is that the codeless connector platform has reached general availability. So these features allow you to create your own custom connector for ingesting data into Sentinel. So for instance, if you have internally developed software that doesn't have a Content Hub connector or an out-of-the-box connector, you can create your own connector to bring those logs into Sentinel. Now, related to this announcement is the fact that the codeless connector builder is also GA. So this is essentially a workbook that provides a user interface experience to help you create your own custom connectors. So this will simplify what can otherwise be kind of a complex process sometimes. In public preview, we have the continuous export to repositories feature. So this is a smart deployment feature that improves the performance of your CI/CD workflow. So the performance is improved by actively tracking modifications made to the content files in your connected repository. So this means that you no longer need to redeploy the entire repository every time you push changes. So only the modified content will be deployed. Additionally, we're excited to announce that Sentinel is now available in China 21 ViaNet and Northern Italy. So expanding is always great. And in another public preview, you can now take advantage of log ingestion via the Azure Monitor pipeline. So the Azure Monitor Edge pipeline is a containerized solution which enables you to collect and route at scale your telemetry data before it's sent to the log analytics workspace. It can cache data locally, sync with the cloud when connectivity is lost and restored, and route that telemetry to Azure Monitor, even if it's in a segmented network where the data can't be sent directly to the cloud. Finally, while not a new feature, it is worth mentioning that the Azure Monitor agent has now reached full parity with a legacy log analytics agent, so the MMA. As you might know, with AMA, you manage your data collection through data collection rules, which allows you to define where to collect the logs from, which logs to collect, where to direct them to, and which transformations to apply. And since we now have reached full parity with MMA, I think nothing should be holding you back to migrate to AMA. Since also we're deprecating the MMA agent, so I think it's time to move on. Now back to you, Jeremy, to discuss our last category.
Thanks, Naomi. I think we probably saved the best for last because this is, I think, my favorite announcement or feature. So something that you mentioned earlier, right? We announced the general availability for the unified security platform, right? So this is a capability that we first announced it at last year Ignite, and then it went GA, right, in April, and like what Naomi mentioned, this a deep dive webinar available. There's also a Ninja show available as well, done by our colleagues. So feel free to check it out if you are still new and not aware about the unified SOX platform. Strongly encourage you guys to explore and perhaps give it a try. And along with the unified SOX platform, you will also get what we call the global search feature, right? So you could see from the search bar in the portal, right? So that allows you to search. So if you're familiar with the entity page in Sentinel, so this is the equivalent, right? That allows you to search for entities, search for devices, users. And you also will get the unified entity experience. So for example, if you go to a device page, not only you see the events, right, or even timeline related to Sentinel, but you also will get there's a tab called Sentinel event tab, right, where you will get your insights from UEBA, right? So you will be able to get all the information related to a specific entity, right, in one single page. So during the investigation of an incident, you would not need to navigate, right, away from the unified portal, right? So this is basically one of the benefits, having everything in one single portal or one single page. That will actually increase your SOX efficiency. Now, another benefits of the unified SOX platform is the data from the Defender XDR table and also Sentinel tables will now appear or available under advanced hunting. So advanced hunting will be the page where you will perform where you run your queries, right? So in the past in Sentinel, that will be your logs page, right? In Sentinel or in log analytics, but in the unified portal, advanced hunting is the page that you use to run or execute your queries. Now, if you don't have any requirements to extend the retention of the XDR table, you don't really need to ingest it into Sentinel, and you'll be able to run the query by correlating your XDR table against your Sentinel table. So if you do have a need to retain the retention of the XDR table, you can continue to send it to Sentinel. And let's say you set it the retention of 90 days of XDR table, you'll be able to search for those 90 days data within advanced hunting and allows you to correlate with the Sentinel data. So not only just the ability to perform search and correlation, but you can also create custom detection, right, for your XDR data and also Sentinel data. Now, lastly, so probably one of the top asks, especially from MSSP. So as, let's say you have a multi-tenant in your environment. So we have a public preview supporting such scenario, starting with a single workspace per tenant. So let's say today, if you have multiple tenants and each workspace, each tenant has a single workspace, you can actually leverage multi-tenant organization or MTO to manage the multi-tenants under one single view. That means you'll be able to see all the incidents, right, from different tenants that has been onboarded to the unified SOC platform. And besides that, it also allows you to run query on the on one single page, which is F1 hunting, and then the same query will actually run on all the tenants, all the workspaces that you have added to the multi-tenant management portal. So later on, I'm going to show you another demo as well. And just recently, we have just uploaded a Ninja show for multi-tenant management also. So feel free to check it out. Now, so I think there's a lot to digest. Let's switch gear a little bit to demo. So we have 3 use cases prepared to showcase leveraging the features that we have discussed. For the first use case, I'll hand it over to Naomi. Naomi, would you like to walk us through the first use case?
Yes. So for our first use case, we'll focus on achieving a cost-effective log storage, while we also want to make sure that the data remains accessible and ready for threat hunting purposes. So we handle large volumes of detailed logs from various network devices, and we will also use Cribble as a collection tool for these logs. We need to store those logs long-term. Imagine it's for auditing purposes. And naturally, we want to do this as cost-effectively as possible, especially since we don't think we will need to access these logs frequently. But on the other hand, we are also still interested in a kind of a summarized format. Now, the solution we propose for our, this environment is to use auxiliary logs and summary rules with Cribble to pre-process the data. So let's dive into it. The first step is to ensure that our Cribble environment is up and running. So let's start by logging into our Cribble Cloud Stream environment. Now, Cribble is a commercial tool for managing large volumes of data efficiently. And in this scenario, Cribble is used for executing data transformations before we ingest them into the auxiliary logs in Sentinel. Currently, data collection rules for auxiliary logs in Sentinel don't support transformations yet. And that's why Cribble is the perfect partner for us in this use case. Once we logged in, we just head over to the Quick Connect section, and Quick Connect gives us an easy overview of all the sources we have and all the destinations to which they are connected to. Now, if we zoom into the Palo Alto source, this source is connected to the Common Event Security Custom table in Sentinel, which is, by the way, auxiliary table, but I will show you that later on. And you might have noticed that there is a pack attached to this connection. So let's dive a bit deeper into what this pack does. Now, this pack goes over all the logs and then transforms them. So for Palo Alto logs, this pack is designed to recognize the logs and then format them correctly for ingestion. Now, also, let's take a closer look at the pipeline for these Palo Alto logs. So here you can see the transformation that will be executed on the data. It's very easy also to run a simple preview to see how this pipeline transformation looks like in practice. So let us take a sample log and let's run our, so this is how the raw logs look like. And if we run, we see that the raw data is structured into a much easier to read and work with format. So, for example, it's also very easy to write changes to this pipeline. That's also very straightforward. So if we add, for example, a function to rename a field, then we just give it a description. And then we say, for example, that we want to change the source port name. Source port should be now original port, for example. We just save it and then rerun, and it's very easy to see this modification, how the transformation looks like, and voila, now we have original port. I'm not going to deploy any of these changes right now because the environment is working and we don't want to have original port in our environment. So I'll leave everything as is without deploying, and we'll just head over to our Sentinel environment. Now, as I mentioned, we will be using auxiliary logs. And auxiliary logs in Microsoft Sentinel will offer a more cost-effective storage option for your logs. So the logs that don't need to be accessed frequently or used in analytic rules, those are the ones that you can save in an auxiliary table. Now, in our case, we are storing those verbose logs from Palo Alto Networks in the auxiliary tables, in the common security log custom auxiliary table. And when you hover over the table, you can see that they are indeed auxiliary logs. Now, let's quickly see how these logs look like in our environment. So we will just pull up for the last 30 minutes the data so that we can see how many logs we've collected and just demonstrate how they are transformed in our efficient storage solution. So we see for the last half hour, let's also try to remember, we collected 5,000 logs. And if we just quickly look at them, we see that they are indeed transformed pretty nicely. Now, these logs are stored in a cost-effective format, but we still want to extract some meaningful insights from them, right? And that's where summary rules come into play. So we can run dynamic summaries on the stored logs to help us identify, for example, anomalies or certain patterns. So if we head over to the summary rules section, we can start creating summary rules. So normally you would create a new summary rule by clicking on the create button. But of course, we already created a rule in preparation for this demo so that it could already start running and creating logs. So let's just edit this existing rule and let's walk through the configuration. So you'll notice that we give it a nice clear name and a description. And we also define that the summaries should be stored in the network patterns custom table. So this one will be a custom table, but it will be an analytic table where you can run rules on afterwards. Now, the logs in this table will keep track of the amount of bytes that are transferred and received between a pair of source IP addresses and destination IP addresses. So that way we can monitor the amount of traffic that goes between a pair of IPs. Now the rule is set to run every 20 minutes with a 4-minute delay threshold. That is to account for the logs that are ingested a bit late. And then we say start running automatically. Now let's head over to the networks patterns table again. And let's see what is ingested in there. So let's also take for the last 30 minutes. And then we can see how our summarized data looks like and if it's meaningful. So first of all, in the common security log table for the last half hour, we had 5,000 logs. Now it's only 3,000. And of course, these logs are smaller in size because now we only have some information about how much bytes are transferred, how much are received, and for the source and destination address. Now, with the summarized data available, you could now, for example, create an analytic rule, because this is an analytic table. So we could, for example, check for anomalies in those transferred bytes. So over here, we have an analytic rule that calculates a baseline. It depends on the network pattern table, and then also checks with how the traffic is looking now. I created also, well, I let this rule run. And there are incidents created, but I know Jeremy also has 2 very interesting demos, so I'll stop here for the sake of time. I just want to quickly wrap up to summarize this demo. So first, we've successfully stored the verbose logs in a cost-effective manner using the auxiliary logs. Then we also ensured that the logs remain useful for threat hunting by using the summary rules to aggregate and then also analyze the data. And there was also the condition that I had to use Cribble. So Cribble played a supportive role in enabling us to achieve these goals of being cost effective correctly. So Jeremy, I think you also are ready for your demos.
That's right, Naomi, and thanks for the comprehensive demo. I like the way you showcase how to use auxiliary summary rule together in conjunction with the data collected by Cribble. So hopefully that would actually resonate, right, and provide some of the ideas for the customers on how to use these new features. And let's move on to the second use case. So I just want to talk about customer, who are new, who are in the process of migrating to Sentinel, especially for Splunk. So let's think about this scenario where you are currently migrating from Splunk. And you would like to accelerate, right, the migrations by speeding up the rule migration process. And normally after migrated from to Sentinel, right, from another SIEM, you would like to look at your environment and optimize it, right, and to examine what are the data sources that you could bring into, and find opportunity to increase your security coverage, right? So that's another scenario. And we also so some customer actually have the requirements to have the BCDR, right, business continuity and disaster recovery capability as part of their requirements. Just that so that for the in the unlikely event of the entire Azure region goes down, right? Sometimes customer have the need to ensure that the SIEM or Sentinel is working as normal. So this is not something that everyone will have it as one of the mandatory requirements, but we have included that in this scenario. So with that, we'll address the scenario or requirements with some of the new features. So we're gonna use the new migration tool to accelerate the migration process for rule migration. So we're gonna use SOX optimization to help gain insights. So insights such as the data value, what are the data sources that are not utilized, right, after the migrations, and what are the data sources or rule that I should deploy or install to increase my security coverage against specific threat-based scenario. And we're gonna examine, right, the portal, and also there's also a book as I mentioned earlier. And lastly, we're gonna use workspace replication feature, so that in an unlikely event of the entire regions goes down, right, there's still you can still run, right, Sentinel, for example. You can still continue to search for the data, right? The data will still be ingested and you be able to perform a query. All right, so let's we go to the portal. So first of all, for this use case, right, we talk about the migration tool. So I'm now in Content Hub page. So you can see there's this theme migration option. And in the theme migration menu, you'll be able to find some prerequisite to use the tool. So for example, you need to ensure that the data, right, that will be used by the rule is already ingested. And you also need to have permissions to create analytics rule, for example, right? So those are the prerequisites that you might need to check before you proceed. And after that, so the tool will actually examine, right, the content that you have in Splunk. So we have provided instructions. It's just a few steps, by running the following query in your Splunk web page, and it will actually export the your existing content in Splunk as a JSON file. And what you need to do is just to upload the file into this tool. So I have a sample file prepared. So I'm gonna add that file over here, and I'm gonna click next. So now the tool will actually examine the content. And remember, I said earlier, it will first of all you try to map against the out-of-box content. And as you can see that from the summary over here, the number of the rule, right, file from the file, how many, actually matches the out of box, how many actually fully translated and then partially translated, right? So we get a summary here, but you could see from the line item, those in green are either there's a match for out of box content or is fully translated, although there's no out of box matches, but the tool managed to translate the Splunk SPL to KQL and to a custom rule. There are some rules, as you could see, that was partially translated. So for example, if I click on this one, I can edit and examine. So it's good to look at the output. Sometimes you could just modify it on the fly. So for example, let's say this one looks like it's gonna look at the Windows security event. So I know that that's gonna be the security event table. So we could change it accordingly and update on the fly and save the changes. So there's a flexibility there. And once you have reviewed the output, and if you would like to deploy, you could see that those are in green. You have the deploy toggle, right, enable. So you can actually click the review, deploy, and then you deploy the rule directly from this tool. Okay, I'm not going to deploy it right now because I already deployed previously to another environment. I just want to show you how it looks like after you click deploy from the tool. So you can see that those are the rules that has been deployed. Now, first of all, you will notice that there is a prefix, right, of Splunk migrated. So that allows you to distinguish, right, which other rules are actually coming from the migration tool. Besides that, just to let you know that those rules will be deployed as disabled, right? You'll be deployed under active rules as disabled. So it allows you to review, right? Give you opportunity to review to ensure that all the logics are according to what you need. So if you need to make any changes, for example, like interval or even thresholds, right? You could make the changes. Otherwise, you are happy with that. You can just enable them, and then the rule will run as the active rule in your environment. So that's that's for the first requirement, right? To accelerate the rule migration. And secondly, once customer migrated to Sentinel, as I say, we provided a tool to help you to optimize your environment. So here, source optimization. Today we have two optimization type, right? So I could look at the coverage, for example, right? So these are my coverage optimization. Today they are, 6 out-of-box threat-based scenarios that we cover, that provide you with the recommendation rules versus what you have in your environment. So I can pick one of those cards, and it visualize what's the current or the existing coverage in this what we call the spider web, and the once the recommended rule are deployed, what would be the coverage looks like. So a good visualization to show you before and after, and this will bring you directly to the Content Hub, where you could proceed to deploy the content, right? The content could be data connector, it could be analytics rule, and you could just use the Content Hub experience that you're familiar with to deploy on the fly. Now, just want to show you quickly on the other data value, the other optimization type, which is data value. So over here, let's say I'm gonna pick this one. You could see that you observe that there's no analytics rule for this specific table, and this table is ingesting this data size over the last 3 months, and they are out-of-box content available for this specific table or data source. So again, if I click here, you bring me to the Content Hub, similar to what you saw earlier, right? To deploy the content to get immediate benefits. And I'm gonna pick another one. So let's say for this one, again, there's no detections created, but there's no out-of-box content, but we suggest, right, if you don't need it for detections, we recommend you to change the ingestion tier to a cheaper tier. So that's the requirement number 2. For the, of course, there's a workbook, as I said earlier, right, that you could leverage as well. Feel free to deploy it from the Content Hub. We also include the source optimization metrics today. Now, on the third requirement, right, which is the ability to perform failover and failback. I'll go back to the slides and show you how to enable, right, the workspace replication. So today, enabling is done via API call. So this is a sample API call where you could run and provide your primary and secondary regions. As you can see, the output, right, is you could see that is now enable requested under the provisioning state. And once this is done, of course, you will provision, right, the replication, but you can check the status after a while. And once this is done, you can see that the provisioning state will change to succeeded, right? That means that the workspace replication has successfully enabled. Now, to trigger a failover, let's say in an unlikely event, right, of the entire region goes down, or maybe you have the need to perform a failover, right? That's why we give the control to you, right? You decide when you need to failover. There might be scenario that, let's say that the certain services in Azure are impacted, but might not necessarily have the need to trigger failover, right? But of course, there will be some scenario where, like, for example, the entire regions go down, where you will need to trigger a failover. But the decision is on your hand. So this is a sample query, a sample API to trigger a failover. You will get the status code 202 once the failover has been triggered, and you'll be able to check the failover states by making another API call here, similar to what you've seen earlier. Now it has this failover state, right? So it indicates that it's active. That means that it's now in the secondary regions that you have configured earlier. Now, if you would like to fail back, so there's again, similarly, make an API call, you get status code 202 to indicate that it's successfully failed back. Now I'm going to show you in the portal on how so let's say once you trigger the failover, right? So I have this workspace that I've triggered a failover. You can see that I can run my query, right? It works fine. And then I can also examine, the LAQE logs table. So in this specific workspace, I have triggered failover a lot long ago. So if I just expand one of the record, you could see that there is a column called is workspace in failover, right? That's equals to true. So this is my secondary region that indicates that this is running in the failover region. But if I just scroll back to some of the earliest record, you can see that this is running on the primary region. Its workspace in failover equals to false, right? And this is my primary region. Okay, so that's the for the second use case. Now we have one more use case that we prepare. So this one is regarding the unified SOC platform. So the scenario would be you have two organization, right? You have an organization that have separate entity with different tenant. So it could be from acquisition, right, where you have two tenants in your environment, and each tenant has a single Sentinel workspace. So you would like to, because you have a centralized SOC, right? So you would like to have a centralized view of both environment. So the feature that used will be the unified portal, of course, and of course now we have the multi-tenant organization that will allows you to view the unified incidents, unified alert queue, and also the ability to perform query to correlate data from both tenants. So I'll quickly go over to the demo environment. So this is a multi-tenant organization. So I'm going to zoom in a bit. So you see that the URL is MPO, right? .security.microsoft.com instead of security.microsoft.com. And I'll go to settings. So I have permission to both tenants. So you can see that I already added one tenant beforehand. So I just want to show you that, okay, so this is another tenant that I have permissions. So I'm going to add that into the multi-tenant management portal as well. So now I'm managing these two tenants, right? Contoso and Contoso 2. So let's examine how the unified incident view looks like. So in the incident view, I'm able to see the incidents coming from Contoso tenant and also Contoso 2 tenant, right? So one single view for my analyst. And besides that, for querying. So I'll go to advanced hunting. Now the query that I executed will actually run on each of the tenants under the hood. So this actually support complex query like join, but just for the sake of demo, I'm gonna take one for a single table. Just want to show you that because it run on the two workspaces that I have, so it returned two results here with different tenant ID, right? So this is something that it will make the correlations easier because in the past in Sentinel, you'll be using the workspace function, right? And lastly, I just want to show you real quick, you have the ability to create what we call tenant group. So that allows you to add content such as this section group, right? So you need to choose the content from one of your source tenant and you'll be able to deploy right in the rest of the tenant. So something that will be useful in managing multi-tenant environment. So that's all that we have prepared for you today. Hopefully you find this useful. With that, I'll hand it over back to Jason. Jason, over back to you.
Great, thanks so much.